The Galactic Award Show begins. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Union glowed in golden lights as thousands of alien species gathered under one roof. Creatures with wings, metal skin, floating heads, and glowing eyes took their seats in silence. The air buzzed with excitement. Today was not just any day. It was the annual Planetary Awards, the biggest event in the galaxy where entire civilizations were ranked, judged, and honored. From the oldest empires to the most advanced machines, every important planet was here to see who would win in each category. The galaxy respected strength, intelligence, and legacy, and this event celebrated it all. At the center stage stood a tall, glowing figure known as Varnak Tel, a race of pure energy. He raised his hands, and the crowd fell quiet. A single beam of light shot into the air, and the massive screen behind him flickered to life. "Let us begin," Varnak announced in a deep, calm voice that echoed through every mind in the room. "We shall now reveal the winner of this cycle's most feared honor, the title of Most Terrifying Planet." There was a wave of laughter across the hall. Many planets believed the award would go to Crither-9, a world made entirely of war beasts. Or perhaps Drunaxis, the Eye Empire that erased 2 solar systems last year. Some laughed because they thought this award was more of a joke than a prize. But then, Varnak raised his hand again and looked toward the crowd with no expression. "The winner is Earth." Silence fell like a sudden death. The laughter stopped. The air froze. Several beings turned to look at each other. A few whispered in fear. One ambassador dropped his drink. Even the war robots paused mid-calculation to process what they had just heard. Earth? That small blue planet from the edge of the galaxy? The place with soft-bodied mammals and water-filled lungs? Varnak continued without emotion. Earth, Sol System. Species, human. Classification, Type 0.9 civilization. Homeworld of the species known as Homo sapiens. The award will be delivered immediately. In the audience, one alien journalist slowly leaned forward in his seat. His name was Juraktun of the Kornak Hive, known for his fearless investigations, but even he was confused. He had studied dangerous planets. He had visited black hole miners and plasma-fueled war moons. But Earth? He had never even considered it worthy of a footnote. The ambassador of Earth, a middle-aged human wearing a simple suit and tie, calmly walked to the stage. He did not look dangerous. He did not glow. He did not float. He just walked like gravity meant something to him. And when he reached the stage, he gave a small smile and a nod. "No speech?" Varnak asked. The human looked at him and said in a calm, polite voice, "You already know why we're terrifying. That's why we're here, isn't it?" Then he turned and walked off stage without saying another word. The silence in the hall remained. Juraktun watched every moment carefully. Something was not right. There was a strange pressure in the air. He opened his datapad and sent a private message to his network. "Starting an investigation on Earth. Something is not what it seems. This planet, this species, needs to be understood before it's too late." He left the hall quietly and booked a direct path toward Sol System. His wings buzzed in slight fear, something he had not felt in decades. Around him, others were still whispering. Some were scared. Some were confused. A few were already preparing reports to their planetary defense networks, and yet Earth had done nothing. No attack, no threat, no speech. Just a smile and a walk as the lights dimmed and the next award was announced. The name of Earth still echoed in every mind. In a galaxy filled with warlords, weapons, and nightmares, a simple blue planet had won the award of fear. But why? That question spread faster than light. And only one being had the courage to go and find the answerer. Juraktun was on his way, and Earth was waiting. The first report, Madness of Nature. Juraktun S ship cut through the black sea of stars with silent speed as it approached the Sol system. The data on Earth was limited, mostly outdated probes and a few unverified transmissions. Most called it a minor world, not even fully united, still divided by land and belief systems. Yet it had taken the entire Galactic Union by surprise. By winning the most feared title, it made no sense, and that was exactly what disturbed Uraraka's. His vessel moved past the rings of Saturn and the gravity fields of Jupiter. He finally saw it, that small blue and green world floating quietly in space. So calm, so peaceful at first glance, it looked harmless, like a child's toy drifting in the dark. He landed the craft in a region called South America, where reports said nature was untamed and wild, where storms roared and jungle stretched for miles untouched by human hands. The moment his feet touched the ground, his sensors screamed. Air was thick with oxygen, dangerously rich by galactic standards. The atmosphere held traces of pollen spores and microscopic life, all swirling around. In unpredictable patterns, the temperature changed every few hours. Clouds formed and vanished with no warning. Lightning danced across the sky. Without command, the planet was alive, not sentient, perhaps, but aggressive in its own rhythm. Uraraka took his first steps into the rainforest. Giant trees rose like towers. Animals made strange sounds from unseen corners. Vines moved slightly as if breathing. The ground beneath him was wet, unstable, filled with insects that could bite, sting, or poison. 1,000 different ways he saw a snake the size of a glider slide between roots without a sound. Then a bird with colors brighter than plasma screamed above and flew off into the dense green. He reached a village where humans lived near the edge of the jungle. He expected fear, but what he found was laughter, children playing in mud, while storms gathered in the distance, an old woman chopping wood while thunder echoed across the sky, a man fixing his roof while wind pulled at his tools. These creatures lived in the chaos, not with fear, but with rhythm. They adapted and continued, as if nature's madness was just background music. Approached a local teacher who smiled and offered him water from a clay pot. Uraraka asked politely if they colds the weather ever made them stop working or moving. The teacher looked confused and said, sometimes the storm knocks down the roof, but we build it again. Sometimes the river floods, but we climb higher. Sometimes the heat is too much, so we rest in the shade for a while, then we go back. The jungle doesn't wait, and neither do we. Uraraka recorded every moment. He wrote in his report, the weather systems on Earth are unstable, unpredictable, and violent storms appear in moments, sometimes hundreds of miles across. Earthquakes split the ground. Volcanoes sleep for centuries, then explode without warning. Floods, fires, landslides, and freezing winds occur, all on one planet, in places not far from each other. It is as if this world was designed to destroy itself and everything on it. But humans survive. They build their homes in flood zones. They climb mountains covered in ice. They dive into oceans full of predators. They run into burning forests to rescue each other. They plant crops on unstable hills and dance during lightning storms. They do not fear the planet. They live with it. They push back, and when it pushes harder, they push harder still. He climbed a tall hill to watch the storm clouds gather above. A human stood beside him, a mountain guide named Rami, who said with a smile, beautiful, isn't it? Uraraka stared as thunder cracked the sky and trees bent under the force of incoming wind. He asked, do you not fear what comes? The guide replied, fear is normal, but so is preparation. We respect the storm, but we also climb the mountain. Uraraka returned to his ship, soaked in rain and filled with questions. This was only the beginning. This was just Earth's weather, Earth's nature, Earth's first impression, and it had already shown him more raw chaos than 10 war planets combined. He sent his first report to the Galactic Union with a single title report, One Earth's planet is hostile, and humans call it home. He sat in silence for a long time, staring at the blue marble spinning below his ship in the darkness. It looked calm, but now he knew better. Earth was not calm. Earth was not peaceful. Earth was a storm with a heartbeat, and the humans were the ones who learned how to dance in the middle of it. Looked at the data for his next investigation. Something deeper, something stranger. Not the planet this time, but the people. He whispered to himself, they live through hell and smile. I need to understand their minds, and with that his ship changed course, heading for the cities of Earth where the real madness began, the mind of a human. The cities of Earth were loud, alive, and completely unlike anything Jarek Toon had seen across the stars. Steel towers reached for the sky, lights blinked in every color, traffic moved with organized chaos, and humans walked among it all with calm expressions. They were surrounded by noise, pollution, accidents, machines, and heat, yet none of it seemed to disturb them. Jarek stood at the corner of a busy street in a place called New York and watched as two cars nearly crashed, but the drivers simply shouted, waved, and kept driving. One almost laughed, the other turned up his music louder. It was not just their world that was wild, it was their minds. No species in the Galactic Union had mental patterns like this. Fear was common across the galaxy. Fear of pain, of death, of loss. But in humans, fear was not a warning to stop, it was a signal to begin. Jarek observed a fireman running into a burning building while others shouted for help. He watched a woman jump into freezing water to save a stranger's dog. He saw a man stand between a speeding car and a child without hesitation. These were not trained warriors. These were ordinary people, and they did these things without being asked. Jarek requested access to human brain data and was given permission by a scientist at a research facility in Tokyo. The woman, named Dr. Hana, explained human fear responses in calm words. She said, our brain has a part called the amygdala. It tells us when to feel fear. But we have something else too, the prefrontal cortex. It lets us decide what to do with that fear. We can choose to act, even if we're afraid. Sometimes that choice is what makes us human. He watched recordings of humans in extreme situations, war zones, plane crashes, natural disasters. In almost every case, some humans froze, but many acted. Some saved others, some risked their lives, some refused to leave until everyone else was safe. In the face of death, they ran forward, not back. They called it courage, but Jarek called it madness. He asked Dr. Hana, why would anyone risk their life for someone they don't know? She smiled and said, maybe because we know what fear feels like, and we don't want others to feel it alone. Words stayed with him as he traveled to different cities. He saw artists painting joy on broken walls, soldiers playing with orphans after returning from war, nurses holding hands with dying patients and laughing with them just to give comfort. He saw protesters stand in front of tanks and blind people walk alone, using only a stick and memory. He visited a mountain hospital where a man had donated his own blood every month for 20 years for people he had never met. Jarek wrote in his report, the human brain is not just built for survival, it is built for resistance. It feels fear and pain and still continues. It breaks and still chooses to move forward. Their minds do not wait for hope, they create it. In the Galactic Union, bravery was often linked to programming, to orders, to genetic design. Soldiers were made to be brave, explorers were born with fearless minds, but humans were not born this way. They were soft, fragile, emotional, and full of doubt, and yet they walked into storms. They chose pain when it meant saving someone else, and they laughed after crying, not because they had no fear, but because they had learned how to carry. I interviewed a young soldier who had lost a leg in a battlefield explosion. The man sat in a wheelchair and said, it's not about what I lost, it's about what I can still do. You can take the leg, but not the will. Jarek was silent as he watched the soldier train to run with a metal limb. Later, he visited a school for children who had survived disasters and found them laughing, playing, and learning as if the past could be rewritten with joy. He asked the teacher how they could be so strong, and she said, we teach them that fear is real, but it doesn't define you. What you do next, that's what matters. In his next report, Jarek wrote, humans are not fearless, they are full of fear, but they treat it like an old friend. They carry it on their backs and keep walking. They fall and cry and scream, and then they stand again with the same broken hands and bleeding hearts and keep going. The true terror is not in their weapons or their storms. It is in the fact that nothing seems to stop them, not even themselves. He stared at Earth from a high orbit as the night lights spread across continents and thought about how quiet the rest of the galaxy was, how peaceful and organized and careful. And then there was Earth a place of chaos but also of impossible courage, a world that should have fallen long ago but kept rising. Over and over again, and he knew now the next step of his investigation was something the galaxy feared. The most he had studied the mind, but now he would study their love for something even more dangerous than war. He whispered to himself, they are not addicted to violence, they celebrate it, they laugh with it, they turn it into art and games. Set course for a stadium where thousands gathered not for peace, but for blood sport, and the next chapter of fear began their love for violence. As entertainment, the sky over Earth was dark, but the stadium below glowed like a burning sun loud. Music shook the ground, thousands of humans roared with excitement, their hands in the air, their faces full of joy and wild energy. It was not a war, it was not a ritual, it was a game, a sport called mixed martial arts. Two humans stood inside a steel cage, waiting to beat each other with fists and elbows and knees. And still the crowd screamed, not in fear, but in celebration. Jarek Toon floated silently in the VIP section, trying to understand the madness. He watched as the match began. The fighters moved fast, strong, and brutal. One slammed a punch into the other's face. Blood sprayed the crowd. Howled the second man, kicked the first so hard he flew backward into the cage. The referee did not stop the fight. The audience stood and cheered. Children were watching. Elders were watching. Even families held snacks and smiled while watching bones break. This was not the battlefield. This was not for survival. This was entertainment. Humans had taken the very essence of pain and danger and turned it into fun. Jarek recorded every second as he sat frozen in shock. He had visited 100 worlds and seen dozens of warrior species, but none of them celebrated violence like this. None of them fed it to their children like a bedtime story. After the match, both fighters stood side by side, one bleeding from the nose, the other holding his arm the wrong way. They smiled, shook hands, and raised each other's arms in respect. Jarek approached them later and asked why they would do such a thing. The taller one said, "We fight not to destroy, but to prove what we can endure." The shorter one added, "The pain shows us we are still alive. The crowd is not here to see us die. They are here to see how far we will go before we fall." He left the stadium and went into a human city at night. Bright screens lit up the sky showing movies where humans fought monsters, shot each other, flew into war zones, laughed while explosions chased them. He walked into a cinema and sat quietly while a war film played on the screen. Humans stormed a beach under heavy fire. People screamed, soldiers fell. But the audience watched with excitement. Some even cried. Some cheered when the hero stood tall, covered in blood and dirt. Jarek leaned toward a human beside him and asked, "Do you enjoy watching your kind suffer?" The man looked surprised and said, "No, we watch to feel something. We watch to remember. We watch because the fight reminds us who we are. We fight because we must, but we watch because we choose to." He moved through arcades and found children playing digital war games where they aimed fake weapons and chased enemies through cities made of pixels. He asked a group of teenagers why they played such violent games, and one girl laughed and said, "It's not violence. It's skill, it's competition. It's fun. When we lose, we try again. When we win, we level up. It's not about death. It's about challenge." Jarek was overwhelmed. This planet did not hide its violence. It painted it, made music about it, wrote books filled with it, turned it into training and sport and art, and somehow that made it more dangerous than any war planet he had ever known. Earth did not fear conflict. It danced with it. Humans did not avoid pain. They studied it, mastered it, and used it to grow stronger. They trained their minds through stories. They trained their bodies through games. They raised their children not to hide from danger, but to face. I've met a filmmaker who said we tell stories about war and monsters and destruction, not to spread fear, but to show our strength, our survival, our hope in darkness. Jarek asked, "And if a child watches too young?" The filmmaker replied, "Then the child learns early that even in terror, there can be courage." In his next report, Jarek wrote, "Humans do not simply live with violence, they evolve through it. They have built a culture where the battlefield is not just physical, it is mental, emotional, symbolic. They teach each generation to face danger through games, through films, through competition. They laugh in the face of fear and clap when others rise from the ground. They turn blood into story and wounds into pride. The Galactic Union fears war, but war is temporary. Earth has made fear itself into a form of celebration, and in doing so they have created something far more enduring than any army, a spirit that refuses to break. He looked up at the stars and thought of how quiet the rest of the galaxy was. No sports, no stories, no games, just order, silence, and survival. And yet here was Earth, wild, loud, bleeding, and laughing in the face of it. Al-Jarrah knew he could not stop. Now he had seen their storms. He had studied their minds. He had witnessed their love for conflict. But something even more terrifying remained: the way they changed themselves, the way they turned weakness into strength. He turned his ship toward the north, where rumors spoke of humans who replaced their limbs with machines and rewrote their DNA to walk farther, fight longer, and survive what no life form should. So began the next chapter in the mystery of Earth. They modified themselves. The cold wind blew through the mountains of northern Europe as Jarrah stepped out of his ship and adjusted his environmental shield. The air was sharp, the snow was deep, and the humans he had come to see were training outside, wearing heavy gear, running through ice, crawling over rocks, lifting massive weights while frost clung to their eyelashes and breath steamed from their mouths. They were not soldiers, they were volunteer civilians who had come to test their limits and break them again and again. He watched as one of them fell face first into the snow, coughing and shaking. His arms were covered in metal, not armor, but part of his body, cybernetic limbs connected with nerves, powered by internal batteries and strange human technology. The man stood up despite the blood on his lips and joined the others. Without a word, no one stopped him. No one pitied him, because on Earth, pain was part of the path and weakness was only temporary. Jarrah entered a nearby facility where scientists monitored screens filled with heart rates, muscle stress, and brain activity. He met Dr. Mila Kess, a human researcher with artificial eyes and synthetic skin that shimmered under the lights. She smiled and said, "Welcome to the Human Enhancement Division. We are not gods, but we no longer accept the limits nature gave us." She showed him a man who had survived a fall from a building by activating shock absorbers in his legs, another who had replaced half his body with bio-armor after a fire yet returned to firefighting within a year, a girl who had been born without legs, now raced faster than most people with high-speed prosthetics, a blind woman who saw through echolocation implants. Jarrah asked if these humans were still considered natural, and Dr. Kess laughed and said, "We were never fully natural. We are born fragile and soft. But we do not stay that way. We fix what is broken. We improve what is weak. We upgrade, because survival is not enough. We want more, we need more, and we build it with our own hands." He toured hospitals where gene therapy turned illness into history, where cancer was edited out of blood cells, where broken spines were repaired with stem cells, and where people who once had days to live now train for marathons with synthetic organs powered by their heartbeat. He visited a military base where soldiers in exosuits moved like machines, but they were still human. They laughed, shared stories, and ate chocolate while discussing strategy. Their suits amplified strength, boosted speed, and blocked bullets, but the spirit inside remained untouched. A soldier with one arm told Jarrah, "This arm lifts tanks, but my courage was born long before it." Jarrah recorded everything. His report grew heavier with each new detail. Earth was not just a world of storms and bravery. It was a forge, a place where pain was used like fire to shape stronger minds and bodies. This species refused to accept nature's design. They rejected the idea of enough. They did not wait for evolution. They created their own future with wires, steel, blood, and defiance. He asked a young woman named Elia, who had survived a mining accident and now lived with 2 robotic arms, "What keeps you moving when others might give up?" She replied, "I have lost much, but if I stop, then I lose everything. When I fall, I rise again, because I can, and because I must. If I am broken, I will build myself again. Better, stronger, not because I Want to be perfect, but because I want to keep going. Jarek sat alone that night on a snowy cliff looking down at the glowing cities below and tried to understand what he was seeing. Earth was not just a planet of chaos or courage or conflict. It was a world where life itself was treated as a beginning, not a prison every human he met carried. Some scar, some wound, some loss, but none carried excuses. Instead, they carried tools. Machines, books, ideas, dreams, and a fire that refused to fade in. His report, he wrote, humans do not fear being broken, because they no longer believe broken means finished. They repair, they rebuild, they rise again, sometimes stronger than before. They do not only survive, they transform their pain into progress, their limits into launch pads, their damage into direction. The Galactic Union had always feared species with power, but Earth had taught him to fear something deeper, a species that never stopped growing, never accepted what was given, never bowed to nature or death. They were rewriting the rules not of battle, but of existence. Jarek closed his report and looked at the stars above, his mind filled with everything he had seen, and still he knew one final truth remained unsaid. The Union feared Earth because of what it could do, but the real fear was in what Earth might choose to do next, because humans had not asked for war or attention, but when challenged, they became legends, not because they were perfect, but because they refused to stay small. He whispered to himself, "They are more than survivors, more than warriors. They are the storm and the hand that builds shelter from it now." It was time to return to the Union Council, because Earth had sent a message, and the galaxy was about to hear it. Earth's warning to the galaxy. The Galactic Union High Council chamber was silent as the delegates gathered across their floating platforms, built in perfect circles with glowing pillars of law above them. Stars visible through the dome made everything feel calm and controlled. But no one felt calm today, not after the reports from Earth, not after the truth had spread through every channel. Every species had read the files from Jarek Tun, and now even the most powerful warlords sat in thoughtful fear, not of Earth's weapons, but of Earth's nature. A debate had started. Some wanted to revoke Earth's title, arguing that it had been a mistake, that such an unpredictable world did not deserve recognition. Some feared that giving Earth attention might encourage other worlds to follow their dangerous path, but others said the title was not just earned, it was a warning. One delegate from the Threx Empire stood and said, "We gave them the award because we finally understood they are what we fear, because we cannot control them." Arguments rose louder. A few demanded sanctions. Some even suggested isolating Earth completely to prevent its ideas from spreading, until a sound echoed through the chamber. A single tone followed by a voice. The translator field blinked blue, the screen above changed, and the face of a human appeared. Man on screen wore a dark uniform with no decoration behind him. Floated the flag of Earth, half blue, half green, the stars of the Sol system arranged in a ring. His face was calm, but his eyes burned not with hate, but with something older, something deeper. He began without greetings, no long speech. "Number apology," he said. "We did not ask for the award. We did not ask for your attention or your fear, but now that you see us clearly, let me say this. We are not coming for your planets, your seats, your crowns, or your precious order. We do not want your wars or your rules. We are too busy building something better." A murmur passed through the council, but no one interrupted. The human continued, "We are terrifying to you because we do not quit. We do not kneel. We do not let fear define our path. You see chaos. Where we see challenge, you see pain. Where we see growth, we are what happens when a species has nothing and still chooses to become everything." The delegate stared as he stepped forward slightly, not with threat, but with truth. He said, "You fear our weapons, but we fear wasting time. You fear our strength, but we fear not using it when it matters. You fear our nature, but we fear surrendering it to become like you, safe and silent and slow." Then his voice dropped and the room felt smaller, heavier. "We have survived every storm our world threw at us. We have torn our own mistakes apart and rebuilt them into dreams. We are not perfect, we are not peaceful, but we are not finished either, and we never will be." He paused only once, and then said the last words that froze even the AI races and the ancient minds across the chamber. We do not seek to take the award from you, but if you think we do not deserve it, if you think we have not earned your respect, if you believe your fear is stronger than our truth, then come take it. The transmission ended. No explosion followed, no fleet appeared, just silence that reached into every mind and planted one clear seed. The humans had not made a threat, they had made a promise. A Galactic stood alone at the edge of the chamber, watching the delegates. Some refused to speak, some looked at each other with pale skin and twitching eyes. One delegate from a race known for conquering entire sectors whispered, they said, come take it, and no. One Mavajarak closed his notes and added one final line for his transmission. Back to the Union reports 6 Earth has spoken, and the galaxy listened. This was not a challenge, it was a mirror, and every species saw what it lacked in that reflection. Earth does not wait for permission, it does not shrink to fit your fears, it grows to match its own vision, and that is what makes them terrifying. As he left the chamber, he passed leaders who no longer argued, they just sat in silence, knowing that no law, no army, and no alliance could erase what Earth had shown them. Not violence, not destruction, but the truth that real strength was not about power, it was about persistence, not about control, but about becoming more than what you were given. Looked out of the dome one last time and saw the stars still shining, but they seemed different, now not safer, not smaller, but somehow closer to Earth than before, because the galaxy was no longer looking at Earth with curiosity or fear, it was looking at Earth with respect, and Earth never asked for that respect, it just made it impossible to deny why Earth truly won. The stars outside the Galactic Council dome had not changed, but something inside every delegate had. Earth's message had not faded, it had echoed in every chamber, every system, every home, as if the humans had not just spoken to the Council, but to the entire galaxy. And the strange part was no one argued anymore, no one denied it anymore. There was nothing left to debate, because the truth had arrived wearing a human face. For weeks after the award show, silence ruled the network's worlds that once laughed at Earth, now studied its history. Species that once feared only weapons now feared stories, stories of humans who risked everything to save strangers, stories of children who built machines from trash to reach the sky, stories of broken nations that rose again, not by force, but by refusing to stay down. The galaxy began to understand the truth behind Earth's terror. It was never about domination. Humans were not interested in ruling others. What made them dangerous was that they kept moving forward no matter what stood in the way. They didn't wait for evolution. They hacked it. They didn't bow to gods. They became them in their own stories. They didn't run from chaos, they danced in it and turned it into rhythm. Some tried to warn others. They said Earth would bring rebellion. They said Earth would infect their people with dangerous ideas like freedom and risk and hope. But the younger species didn't care. They watched Earth's signals. They studied its music, its books, its failures. They saw pain and still saw beauty. They saw war and still found meaning. And the one thing they all whispered was, if Earth can rise, then maybe we can too. Galactic returned to his world not as a spy, not as a scout, but as a witness. The reports he sent now were different, no longer cold records or tactical observations. Now he wrote with something that had been missing before, something the humans had awakened in him. He wrote with fire. He told his people the truth. Earth did not win because of their ships or soldiers or threats. They won because they changed the rules. They turned survival into art, they made suffering into fuel, and they looked at the impossible and said, not yet, but soon. The Galactic Union met again, this time not to debate, not to punish, not to fear. They came together to ask one final question: why? Earth, why now? What does it mean that the most terrifying world was also the one that had offered no war, no invasion, only honesty? And in the center of that final gathering came a gift, not from the Council, but from Earth, a package carried by a small drone. No weapons, no tricks, only a simple box, and inside the box a stone, not rare, not glowing, just a smooth piece of earth. A message burned into it with ancient tools. Read, we don't want to lead, we don't want to follow, we just want to rise, and if you rise with us, then we are not terrifying, we are family for a long time, no. One spoke not because they didn't understand, but because they finally did. 1,000 species had traveled through stars, bent light and time and matter, but they had forgotten how to feel. What Earth had done was not just show them power, it had reminded them of purpose. Earth had fought its own extinction more times than the galaxy could count, and every time it had crawled back stronger, bleeding but smiling, broken but building. This was not madness, this was humanity, and that was why they had won the terrifying planet award. Was never meant to be beautiful, but now when others looked at it, they saw something different. They didn't see monsters, they saw mirrors, and in those mirrors they saw who they could become. Earth did not change to fit the galaxy changed because it saw Earth and chose not to look away. In the end, the humans returned to their world without asking for thanks. They had work to do, more problems to solve, more stars to reach, more children to teach how to fall and stand again, and fall again, and still stand, because that is what Earth does. It stands again and again and again, until the impossible gets tired and moves out of the way. That is why Earth truly won, not because it was feared, but because it was understood, and once understood, it could never be ignored again. And somewhere deep in space on a forgotten moon, a young alien picked up an old human book, opened it, and read the first line, and for the first time felt something powerful. Not fear, not confusion, but hope, because the book said, this is the story of Earth, and if you're reading this, then you're already part of it.